fact,
the single largest contributors to life expectancy increase over time, centralized sewer.
From Homo sapiens all the way to the 19th century dandies in London, everybody was aware that drinking good water meant you survived and hence knew about the importance of access to clean water. But on the other hand, the importance of proper sanitation in human health was totally ignored. This is why most of our modern cities used to be swamps in the beginning, and why everybody found absolutely logical to dispose of their droppings on the streets. And as a consequence, humankind learned the hard way how important wastewater collection and treatment is, as this had obviously serious impacts on public health along with the environment. But while numerous epidemics ravaged Europe through the Middle Age and until the 19th century, humans still tended to have short memories and easily forgot that inappropriate sanitation wasn't helping at all.
No, I don't know why, but there's something wrong with it. It stinks.
They also forgot that a centralized sewer used to be a thing as far as in the Babylonian ages in the Mesopotamian Empire, so around 3,500 years before Christus. And indeed, when the centralized sewer made its comeback at the turn of the 19th century, Josiah Cox was proven right. The adoption of wastewater collection was single-handedly responsible for 4 years of additional life expectancy. So why would anyone in his right mind even question the pertinence of centralized sewers? Well, for one simple reason: they're very expensive.
Once you look at the existing systems, around 70 to 75% of the cost is actually in the pipes and pumps, not in the treatment and not in the storage. So you look at that and say, well, these pipes are failing and they cost $500,000 a mile to replace.
But shall we really consider the costs for something deeply linked to people's well-being? Theoretically, no, unless we have a better alternative.
One thing that is different than in the beginning of the 20th century is that we have a lot of digital information that we can gather using sensors and actually even control our infrastructure systems remotely. You don't really need 10 chemists at 10 treatment plants and 10 pump operators at 10 pumps to do this. We can do all this remotely.
In other words, we can drop a tremendous portion of the 75% of costs linked to pumping water around long networks while operating similar treatment steps, just at a smaller scale.
Small is the point.
Small is all I need.
Now, if we're honest, we haven't really invented that concept in the water sector. We've rather been looking at the shoulder of our bigger brother, the energy world.
With the advent of technology and deregulation, you ended up with microgrids that then turned into distributed energy.
The same concept applied to water translates into a decentralized infrastructure close to people's homes and industrial processes, but centrally connected thanks to the digital revolution. And the name for it is straightforward: distributed water.
I like it simple. Clear.
$7.8 billion will be invested in distributed water and wastewater systems in 2023 in North America. That's a sizable number, even though arguably lower than the $111 billion water infrastructure package we discussed in the previous chapter. The difference reduces when you consider that those $111 billion will be spent over 5 years, hence reducing to $22 billion a year.
That's good money.
It further reduces when you compound the implementation speed. While large infrastructure projects are rolled out in years, the agility of the distributed approach allows for reducing that time to impact to months.
Move. Faster, faster, guys.
Something else reveals when you further split down these $7.8 billion, which are growing at a compound annual growth rate of 6%. There's a faster growing subsegment, the point of use application, aka all the shades of filters you'd install under your kitchen sink. That specific subsegment grows double-digit every year and is expected to nearly triple between today and 2030. In other words, investment in distributed treatments grows twice faster than investment in central infrastructure, and the specific point of view subsegment grows 3 times faster. There's a simple way to tell those filters are the new cool kid on the block.
5 years ago, if you went to Amazon and you wanted to buy a reverse osmosis filtration system for your kitchen, you were looking at spending $500 for the unit, and you would buy filters separate. It would reject 2/3 of the water you put into it as waste. Relatively low pressure system, not that great. Today, if you go to Amazon, there will be more vendors than you saw 5 years ago. And for between $100 to $200, you'll get a system exactly like that with 1 year of filters included. And for $500, you get something which rejects less than 25% of the water coming into it and actually performs a lot better than any of the other systems and has all kinds of sensors and stuff like that telling you what you're actually consuming.
Now, Point-of-use treatments also propose an ambivalent picture of the future. Yes, they unlock a world of water fit for purpose, where your kitchen tap gets to the highest level of drinking water, even knocking off PFAS and the like as a welcome side effect, and your toilet flush now can happily be done with lower quality water. But that's also a double-sided sword. If the water infrastructure doesn't need to deliver drinking standards to every tap, investments may further decline, when we just saw in the previous chapter that the opposite must happen.
Whoops. Whoops. Did you say whoops?
And central networks being slowly abandoned to turn into the post-utility era isn't exactly science fiction.
India, at this point, there is no household which is middle class and above that does not have a reverse osmosis system in their kitchen.
These radically decentralized treatments hence potentially offer a better service level at a lower cost, but with possible class discrimination, as all households won't invest in it at the same speed and won't always maintain it appropriately.
Is there a better offer?
Sure, we can imagine workarounds.
Speaking now very fancifully, very Jetsons-ish future, but we could very logically have a situation there where somebody comes knocking on your door and says, we've noticed from our internet chip that you haven't changed the filter. Is there a reason for that? I don't want to be too big brother. If somebody wants to toxicize their system, they should be allowed to do that. But I think that there are solutions that we could have without being too fanciful or too crazy.
Yet, a maybe better alternative would be to distribute the systems in a slightly less radical manner.
The wastewater that I'm generating, that could be treated and reused also. Maybe not just at my house scale, but maybe in my neighborhood scale. And if that is possible, I'm really shooting for a much higher quality of service and safety for myself.
We are talking here of systems to be located in a collective building's basement, and if you allow me that shameless plug, you may want to listen to my conversation with Aaron Tartakovsky from Epic Cleantech by Season 4, Episode 3 of my podcast to learn more about that approach.
Shame.
An alternative, yet close approach would be to aim for the size of the condominiums we see in other parts of the world. It may sound weird in the American context, yet what's a condominium if not a newly built suburban housing estate? So, in a nutshell,
Please, tell us what you prepared.
distributed water and wastewater already receive a third of the infrastructure investment today, and they grow twice faster than conventional central alternatives. As they skip a sizable portion of the network rollout or revamping, they arguably offer a considerably better value for money, and technically, the best size may be up to each point of use, yet if we compound in sociology, a better approach may be the small collective layer. I feel like we're really making a huge step forward here in our quest to rethink water, but let's make sure we don't miss the elephant in the room.
If your only focus is municipal, you're missing the largest piece from a volume standpoint.
Indeed, municipal water in the US represented 13% of the water use in 2015, while agricultural uses accounted for 37% and industrial ones for the remaining 50%.
That's a lot.
We can further split down this 50% by taking out the large chunk of water used in thermoelectrical power generation, like the toilet flush in our households. That water just needs to exist, not really to be treated to a high standard. And the same would be valid with irrigation water in agriculture. And in the remaining waters used in industrial processes, but also aquaculture or mining, there's a fascinating trend to observe. Between 1985 and 2015, the volume of water abstraction was reduced by 43%. How's that even possible? Well, sure, some industries have moved out of the US, and some others have become more water efficient. But the big chunk of that reduction is linked to water reuse and recycling within industrial facilities. Both are driven by environmental regulations and limited availability of freshwater resources in some areas.
Well, necessity is the mother of invention.
As these constraints are here to stay in the new realm of climate change, that trend will keep on developing.
Pick an industrial system. I don't care if it's a chip manufacturer, which, by the way, we worry about chips. 60% of the chips come from Taiwan. They're having their worst drought in 60 years. Wonder why there's a chip issue.
With all these drivers, water scarcity, environmental regulations, industrial resilience, water reuse and short-loop treatments have a lot of wind in their sails.
Sweetheart, we're taking off.
Remember the $7.8 billion distributed water and wastewater system investment I mentioned earlier in this chapter? Well, 65% of it is going to industrial systems. Now, that doesn't mean either that industrials suddenly all became water and wastewater treatment experts. Their core competence remains in their industrial tool. So how can they ensure their water safety? Simply by establishing private partnerships.
That doesn't exist.
Okay, That term doesn't exist. I totally made it up to reflect on the private-public model we discussed in the previous chapter, but still, the principle remains. A large entity, the industrial player, delegates the water topic to a specialist, a water industry player.
It's now an operating expense on a long-term contracted basis. You take it away from, I have to worry about this system from an operating standpoint, to a CFO type decision as far as whether to outsource or not. And I use outsourcing generically. I mean, you can call it integration, you can call it EPC, you can call it anything you want, but it's taking assets which would normally be inside the fence and turning it into a third-party contracted.
Industrials that follow that route prove to get better water resilience, environmental compliance, and overall integration within the community. What? You think that's not an industrial's first key performance indicator? Well, they get their water and wastewater sorted at a better cost, too. But wait, if distributed approaches get widely adopted, what does that mean for the existing networks and infrastructures? Is it a sunk cost that can't be valorized anymore? Not really. There's still value to extract from our century-old workhorses. Climate change's effect on the water cycle actually doesn't stop at water scarcity. It also comes with more extreme climate events with higher frequency. In that context, cities will not only have to mitigate the periods of drought, the famous day zeros we've seen in Cape Town, Chennai or Sao Paulo, but also deal with increased floods. Nature-based solutions represent a potent complement to existing grey engineering approaches, yet they won't be suited in every context. Think of New York City. Where would you build the next green space on top of Central Park?
We don't have storage in a place like Manhattan, but we have an extensive sewer network, which is large pipes. If you think about storms, the storms move from south to north, or the storms come in from the east and go to the west. So if we were to start thinking about where is the water coming into the sewers and where is it going, Montreal has already done some experiments where they have gates and pumps. The sewer system itself is being used for storage. So where at the moment we don't really have that much rain coming in, water is pumped from other areas to those sewers and around in other ways.
Guess what that builds up for? Exactly, distributed sewer management with several decentralized pump and gate stations and one centralized digital layer that follows meteorological trends and predictions to actuate and automate the network. In the end, it's not about opposing the centralized approach to the distributed one. Both assets have perks and limitations. Leveraging the sunk cost of the one while redirecting more investment and beefing up the second will deliver an amazing synergy that finally allows the rethinking of water and not disrupt it. And now that we've agreed on the problem and examined how we may fix the broken economics and the broken pipes, remember, that was our previous chapter. It's time to get to the last question that matters. How do we get the ball rolling? Well, that's right here, and I'll wait for you with solutions in the last chapter. Come on, click it.